Coogs house. Sometimes it's better to survive and be lucky than be good. I kind of think Houston's got both.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and I'm ecstatic about that. I just can't believe that just happened. Houston beating UCF 69-68. If you want to join the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. Just what's your PG version of the first words out of your mouth were when Jawan Roberts hit the left-handed, we call it a mic and shove right there by the rim, like anyway, to take the Houston Cougars victory. There were 1.1 seconds left and some chaos after that. But man, oh man, Houston remains undefeated in Big 12 play, 10-game winning streak. That was a rough one. So tell us in the comments again. We got a live show here going on to talk about all things Houston Cougars. I've got my phone talking to me because it thinks I'm talking to it. Cougars from Germany saying Coogs house, and highly favored as well saying Coogs house. Agreed. Weird game from the start, and I kind of had a weird feeling it was going to be a weird game. Houston and the noon Eastern tip-off and the road trips and, coming off of some big wins. Jay Bird chimes in here and says exciting finish, and it was. Just had a weird feeling it was going to be a weird game. I was trying to text back and forth with Mike, who runs Locked On UCF. Couldn't get, obviously, with him for a crossover show. They're, frankly, a little more football-focused show. They don't balance all this with basketball. Quite as much, but wow. Just can't believe Houston held on to win that. And frankly, there were several moments throughout it where, like, Cryer missed the three where you, like, avoided a block, but it went out of bounds on an air ball because he was doing too much to avoid the block. Or UCF came down and hit a three to go up 8, I think it was, with like 4.5 minutes left. And all those kinds of things. And it just felt like the kind of game that just like, that it felt like Houston was going to let go. It felt like Houston teams of past might have let go, and frankly, the resolve of that group to take that one back and seize that one was great to see. Say what you want about UCF, that as of right now would be a quad 1 win. They're top 75 in the net, and it's in Orlando, which checks all the boxes on that one. Patrick here says that he exhaled when that shot went in. I think that's a fair reaction, say the least, Patrick. Now, I look at weird games like that and see kind of what they do. We know Houston's got the great culture and all the great background and stuff like that. And I want to get more into the schematics throughout the show of like the impact of the bigs in this game. I feel like a big dominated game both ways. And then if this game has future problems, I guess we can get that in the third segment, because that's can end on a downer, I guess. But I really, as we sit here and kind of relax for a second after Houston played a really tense game way too early in the day for that tense basketball game as well. Really kind of thought that honestly, I kind of was worried about that one about halfway through. This is a lot of intensity for like an early Big 12 play kind of thing. Not a team you were necessarily thinking you were going to get taken to the wire with, and Houston did, but came out on top. Now, I mentioned Roberts and Francis as the big guys. I want to spend a segment talking about just the impact of the big guys because it was a unique game in that sense, but Houston struggled pretty much everywhere else. Cryer was 2 of 13 from the field for just 6 points. Emanuel Sharp was 4 of 11 from the field for 9 points. Those guys are both your leading scorers at over 14 apiece. And frankly, they're both shooting over 40%, Sharp close to 50% from 3. They were a combined 3 of 13 from behind the arc. Houston was 3 of 16. So it's not like they had a whole lot of help from anyone else out there either. Just a weird game shooting the basketball offensively. Actually, they had decent action as far as constant movement and those kinds of things, but missed shots. And I kept thinking eventually there'd be a regression to the mean on those kinds of things, and things would fall. But instead, UCF kind of seized their opportunity. We'll talk about in the big segment Mustafa Diem, their big guy, but their guards kind of filled in the hole. And Houston's game plan defensively was to undoubtedly take Keyshawn Hall, their leading scorer, dominant power forward, out of the game, and they did. He was 2 of 12 from the field, had just 6 points. Missed a free throw late. That was kind of important. And Tugler took a foul instead of letting him dunk one home late that probably ends the game. And sometimes dunks can be worth more than 2 points. That Keyshawn Hall dunk would have been a big deal. Tugler goes up for the block, gets called for the foul on it, probably saves himself from being on a highlight reel. And ultimately, following those free throws, Houston was still kind of in the basketball game, and then took it back over at the end. In a game of 2 halves, I thought the first half was about as ugly as I'd seen Houston play this year. That's Auburn, Alabama, and San Diego State included. Really, really ugly first half of basketball. Houston had a 39-point second half, which is pretty good offensively. Honestly, though, they had trouble with a lot of the things that UCF was doing. UCF tried to slow the game down, make it less possessions, even slower than Houston does. UCF did not have a whole lot of turnovers, relatively speaking. I say relatively speaking because Houston's obviously used to forcing a lot of turnovers, and that was not quite the case today. But I guess that's all relative, right? Because theoretically, Houston's used to forcing double digits in the turnover margin and is used to getting a little bit more ball pressure going on things. UCF had, I guess it finished at 13 turnovers, but they had 3 of them in the final minute and a half. And really, Keyshawn Hall had several of them, and you could almost argue that he hurt them in a way. So Houston was trying to take him away, obviously, and did so offensively, but he also might have been in his own head about it afterwards because of the turnover problem. I guess the inverse of that, though, would be as badly as Houston shot the ball, and sometimes a missed shot is a turnover, right? It's just a bad shot. Houston only had 8 turnovers of their own and did win that part of the contest. Houston also won the rebounding battle by 1, but I would point out that at halftime, when things were getting ugly and looking ugly, and frankly, at whatever stretch you looked at, when Houston was losing the lead or was behind, that number was the inverse, right? Houston won the rebounding battle 42-41. But the ebb and flow of that rebounding battle clearly dictated the ebbs and flows of the score in this one as well. I just, I can't believe they let Joan Roberts lose on it. So if you missed the inbounds play, they basically stacked up on the free throw lines, the lane line closest to the sideline. They were throwing it in from with a little over, I guess, just under 4 seconds to go. And they split from the stack and had Jawan Roberts there on an ISO, and he took his guy to the left block, got up and under for a little left-handed finish with just over a second. It was 1.1 second to go. Can't believe they let Jawan Roberts get to the left block, but I guess that the stack and split concept was right to pull guys away, so we got more of a true ISO look as opposed to someone you could double from. And what was funny was they actually had shooters, Sharp and Cryer, there to kind of keep guys from able to double down on Roberts. Roberts is a really good passer. He could have kicked one of them for 3. But almost on percentages today, I feel like the Roberts left-handed, bunny was obviously a much, much worse shot for UCF than Cryer or Sharp from 3. I mean, those guys have been pretty bad shooting the ball all day long. Patrick makes a comment on the bigs. I want to bring up in the big segment. But just to put a bow on what happens, then there's 1.1 seconds left. UCF has to heave the length of the floor. They hit the score clock above the stadium or above the floor, throwing it down that far. So Houston gets a baseline out of bounds. Houston's baseline out of bounds, they call an illegal screen offensive contact foul on Jawan Roberts for butt bumping a guy as he went by. I don't even know how on purpose it was. Being a savvy older guy, it might have been a little on purpose. Either way, they then give UCF back the ball on that foul call and throw it in. And Sampson calls a timeout, puts Tugler on the ball with all his length, and he tips the full-length inbounds pass, and Uzan picks it off. And I cannot believe they pulled that out. I was legitimately sitting here with my wife talking with like 4 or 5 minutes ago, but Aaron's got to run today and this and that. And I had practice this morning and I had a game last night. So I had to like do my own thing and take over some of that because I haven't been around to help, whatever. And I was like, and I think they're going to lose this stupid basketball game too and make it a really rough weekend. And I cannot believe they won that basketball game. I want to talk about the bigs and give them a lot of love in a second. But today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Best place to get picks and pick more than or less than and win big. This message is brought to you by PrizePicks, the place to get real money on sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, billions of the B. PrizePicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports, whether it's the playoffs, the regular season. PrizePicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of the football action. And now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks. And here that works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. And if your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times back your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. I'm going over Lamar Jackson passing yards tomorrow. I guess that's later today. And then over Travis Kelce receiving yards. That's what I'm looking at right now. Lamar Jackson has had a great season. Frankly, talking about him makes me, smile. Think about how Houston played him once upon a time. And then Travis Kelce and 70 receiving yards. If you look what the Chiefs do in playoffs, they find Travis a lot. So I had to keep looking for him. With the app, you get all your winnings fast, sometimes as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 back instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for putting down $5 and playing. Don't wait to take your game to the next level with PrizePicks. Run your game. Park Ranger Locked on Coogs. You're trying to figure out a way to put words on, and I'm probably stumbling over them. Houston's 69-68 survival win in Orlando over UCF, who, we can just say it now, was being very disrespectful to NASA and all that is Space City Houston by wearing their Space U uniforms. I really, really wish Houston would lean into that some themselves, but I would settle for some light blue Jordan gear with the U of H on it. So if you're listening, marketing team, light blue Jordan gear with the U of H on it, please send it my way. Now, Houston won this game in no small part because of the big guys, and that was not a pun on purpose, but that worked. Jalen Roberts had 21 points, and Javier Francis had 16 off the bench. JoJo Tugler played just 12 minutes, had his own foul trouble early. With the technical and stuff like that, right? Had just 2 points, but it's hard to argue didn't have an impact on this game. Had big block, had the foul that prevented the one dunk, and like I said, had the tip at the end. And Houston really fell back on those big guys in a game where the small guys, and I don't mean to insult anyone, but didn't show up, right? Emanuel, I guess, did finish with 9 points, but felt like he was non-existent for large parts of this game. LJ Cryer might have just had his worst offensive game as a Houston Cougar. Now, I think he did some things defensively that he probably didn't do a year ago. He's much improved on that end, but I would say that's his worst offensive game as a Houston Cougar. Milos had just 8 points, and I guess he did have 5 assists, but I feel like those were looking for the big guys. The big guys dominated this matchup for Houston, and I tweeted about it, the redemption arc for Javier Francis. Started the year hurt, had to start a few games and lost his starting spot and is going to work his way back in a rotation. Tugler is looking like guys telling me he may be a pro, right? I mean, just the way he's fighting and battling and the length and all those things. Francis to have the composure, the resolve, every single one of those culture words to jump into this one and take over early and kind of keep Houston close, right? He didn't have the knockout blow that Jawan Roberts had later. We'll talk about Jawan too, but to have Francis come in with just the ability to keep Houston within striking distance. Houston cannot win this game without Javier Francis. Now, if you look at just the first half alone, Francis had 14 of his 16. Again, 14 of his 16, and Houston had just 30. I mean, I know that offensive output and points are not necessarily everything, but you do have to score more than the other team to win, and that's just really, really impressive. Further, the unexpected hot hand for UCF was Mustafa Diem, and he's 7'2" and long, and I thought he was an awkward matchup a little bit coming in, but honestly, I thought the deal there was since he's around the rim so much, Houston would be fine. He stepped out and hit a three. I mean, he was out of his mind this game offensively, played the best game. I watched 3 games going into this one to get ready for it. And then I texted with Mike of Locked on UCF some, and his kind of co-host that I may have on at some point if they ever get to play again. Couldn't get scheduled right for a crossover, but no one would have had that day coming from DM, especially with Houston having guys like Tugler and Roberts to bother him. I mean, Mustafa DM had a career kind of day, and Houston legitimately might have just gotten the guy drafted. And I don't like that they do that. I think that's just the way that's going to go. 7'2", had 18 points and 3 blocks. Weirdly, just 5 rebounds. I thought, like, watching it live, it felt like a lot more than that, but he was more of the one defending the rim, I guess, on the front end. I kind of expected the other big guy, Keyshawn Hall, to be the guy they went through. And while they tried, he had just 6 points, had 11 rebounds, was very active on the glass. But Mustafa Diem versus Javier Francis and Jalen Roberts felt like good old 1990s basketball. I mean, bigs battling bigs, post-up moves from Roberts, up and unders, catching lobs for Diem and Francis, and high energy, high motor, which guy's got more guts, which guy's got more push, which guy's got more drive through the pain in those various moments. Felt, again, reminiscent of like a different era of basketball. Houston and UCF are both teams that are dominant because of their perimeter play. Houston with the shooting of Cryer and Sharp, but Darius Johnson and Dallin Coleman, both for UCF, are pretty talented scorers as well. But this game came down to the big guys, and you got to give props where it's due to the players, but Kellen Sampson, Coach Kellen, he coaches those big guys day in, day out. That's his position group. Houston's pretty diligent about what assistant coach works with what position. Quanz gets the point guard, for instance, right? And like Kellen had his guys ready to roll. Now, I know there's probably comments flying in about JoJo Tugler and the tech and stuff like that. But on the whole, if you walk into a game where the other team's got a 7'2" guy, and the other guy, Keyshawn Hall, as you mentioned, is coming off of a 40-point game, they're definitely feeling like their advantage is inside. And instead, as I think someone just posted, yes, Patrick Bodner points out it was 48-26 in the paint. Again, they had the size. They're the guy that just had a 40-point game, which is the most in the Big 12 in a couple years. And Houston came away with a dominant performance in the paint, which is really important when you factor in how poorly they shot from behind the arc. I mean, 18% from 3 on 16 shots is really, really, really bad. Now, I understand that there's a lot of with all the colliding bodies inside, foul call this, foul call that. But truthfully, I think Houston did enough to themselves that they're probably not going to even talk about that, right? Not that they ever do. Samson's not the kind of guy to really focus on that a whole lot at all. But they got enough things to fix, and honestly, just shooting back at their averages will fix a whole heck of a lot. Now, battling on the inside is going to work in a lot of these games, but Houston is going to find a way to be a balanced offense, because now they're going to line up against Utah on Tuesday, if my memory serves me correct, and Utah is probably going to find some way to get Roberts off the left hand and keep Tugler off the putbacks and all that kind of stuff. But man, for today, to get to see that be the way that it goes, and again, this redemption arc for Francis, going back to that 6-man role, really, really important. He was an impactful first half player, regardless of role, at 14 points. But I just can't praise the guy enough. Not every player would take what's happened to him this season, where he essentially loses his starting spot due to an injury because he didn't quite fully recover. He's playing with a little bit dinged up. Just impressive. Just continue to be impressed with the guy. He is a guy that thought he had a starting spot a couple years ago, and Jarris Walker showed up as a 5-star commit kind of out of the blue and took it from him. And he just continues to work and trust the work and trust the work. We obviously got that out of Roberts. We knew we can get 20 points out of Roberts. That's I think that's Robert's third 20-point Big 12 game, which is funny because people were kind of dogging him for his non-conference play, right? They were saying, "Oh, is Roberts a little too old, a little too beat up, is maybe not healthy after the knee stuff that happened last year or whatever." And he admittedly had a lot less production in non-conference play, but in conference play, you've gotten to see a whole different Jawan. He opened up with Oklahoma State, but he continues to have 20-point night after 20-point night after 20-point night, which is something Houston's just riding right now. Houston's just riding it. I want to talk a little bit in the third segment, and then we'll get on out of here and get you about your long weekend. But I want to talk some in the third segment before we do that about if this feels like a problematic future for Houston. Are there things to worry about for the Cougs? Because there might be. And tell me in the comments down below while I'm thinking about it if you've got future problems as well. But before we get to any of that, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, because from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bet to win or lose that $5 bet. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Now, this is where I get to talk about why I am going to look at the Texans this weekend on FanDuel. I just got a feeling, got a gut feeling. Had a good feeling today was going to be a weird basketball game, and it was. Maybe you want to roll with me. If you do, don't, whatever. Just visit FanDuel.com and join today to get $200 back in bonus bets as soon as you put down that $5 bet. It's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Ainsworth, locked on Coogs here, talking about Houston and getting out of a somewhat lucky feeling win. I had a feeling it was going to be weird. Sammy points out here, weird going in. But man, oh man, I didn't know it was going to come down to the buzzer here. Giovanni asked if Robert's family was in attendance. Thank you, Giovanni, for chiming in here as well. But I didn't see them ever flash, and it'd be hard to imagine that they weren't. Robert, remembers, from the Virgin Islands. He went to high school in Killeen. He's got a relative there that he stayed with when he went there. And so I know that he's had people at games in the state of Texas before, but I don't know that he necessarily has a whole bunch going on. Had a whole bunch in Orlando. I do imagine Emanuel had people there. His father's been at other games, or his people have been at other games too, but been Orlando local. I don't know why college still use the one-on-one as a comment from Koji here. It's an antiquated bit. High schools in Texas even got away from one-on-one. But one-on-one at the end, Terrence Arsenal missed the front end of the one-on-one that almost cost Houston the game there for a second, but didn't. Thankfully, didn't. And so, speaking of one-on-ones and free throw shooting and stuff like that, transition, I feel like this game kind of shed light on what Houston's going to look like in that inevitable game come March, when you've got theoretically bad shooting night out of multiple guys, right? In this game, you were 3 of 16 from behind the arc. Perhaps more importantly, Sharp and Cryer were combined 3 of 13 between the two of them, right? Two guys that were, going into the game, top 10 in the country for a lot of the year. Emanuel Sharp's been number 1 in the country in three-point percentage. I'd argue they got 13 good looks, or at least 10 of those 13 were good looks, especially considering, I guess Emanuel Sharps are typically further out, but it's been fine for him his whole career to be farther out than the line. And so I look at this one as a blueprint win for Houston, because if they get that taken away from them, or if they have a bad shooting night come March, where do they go? They got a lot of block-to-block screen action to free up Roberts. They had a lot of drop-off to Francis, and frankly, Tugler can do a lot of those things too if given the opportunity. And so, in looking at how this one impacts the future, thank you for the sticker, Giovanni. Giovanni, shout out for the sticker there. I look at, is there a future problem here with, I guess you could play a team that has a dominant interior presence defensively and have a bad shooting night, and what does this team look like then? But if I look at like the Big 12 conference, the best players at Iowa State are perimeter guys. Momolovic, kind of an in-betweener. And then at Kansas, Dickinson's a big offensive force, but I don't know he's quite the big defensive force. The future problems for this team, though, are going to be if one of those three bigs are in foul trouble, because they win this game today, and Roberts finishes with 4 fouls. Tugler had 3. He also had the tech earlier, so you're trying to like gauge, make sure you don't get a second tee out there. The tech being a double technical early in the game. The big deal here is you don't have the depth in the front court that you've got in the back court. You can go small and play Terrence or Malik or when Ramon is back, play him at that power forward spot. But you certainly don't have a bunch of centers to throw around or a bunch of too big lineups to offer. And so if you have a night where they're in foul trouble and the shooting is gone, this could kind of outline how there's some trouble in the future there. I actually kind of leave this game, and I was going back and forth in DMs with a guy or two talking about this one, that like it makes me feel better for when that inevitable bad shooting night comes back, because we've seen now Roberts can do the deal where he puts the guys on his backpack and goes with it, right? Javier Francis can do the deal where he puts guys on his back and carries them for a half. I mean, just we've seen JoJo do it in the past, so we know he can too. But just to have multiple guys to go with the high percentage low post shots, and I say high percentage because of who's shooting them, not because they typically are. Really, really important for this club. Now, moving forward to Utah, I don't know necessarily that Utah at home will pose the same kind of challenge for Houston. Houston was down at different points, double digits, down 8.5. I don't know. Utah is 10-6, and they have not played a challenging schedule. And like they have lost to, let me pull this back up, Mississippi State, St. Mary's. They got waxed by Butler, waxed by Tech, waxed by Iowa State. They did beat Oklahoma State, I guess, but I imagine I can get destroyed later today by BYU in this one as well. But Utah is probably the last, as Sammy here points out, like cupcake feeling game for a while. I only feel comfortable calling it that because it's a home game for Houston. Playing in Salt Lake City is kind of weird. But it's a home game for Houston, and it is, I believe, Tuesday. And man, oh man. After that, Houston's got kind of a little bit of a murderer's row. So it'd be nice to kind of go into that, continue the win streak. Now, Utah's guys, as far as their roster goes and all of that, are on the bigger side. They've got, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys that are 6'10" or taller, 3 6'9s, including Keanu Dawes, who's a Houston area kid, actually. Anyway, but when I look at Utah, I think that you're actually going to probably see the inverse, right? You're going to see a regression to the mean on shooting percentages from the guards. The bigs are going to be too occupied defensively to expend a whole lot on offense. And so you see something kind of more back to how it's been. But seeing a couple big guys put Houston in their backpacks and go forward is a really, really big deal. Now, I got some Utah film to watch. Got other high school basketball stuff I got to do as well, and things like that. Monday's a holiday. We're off. But we're going to be back previewing the Utah game and talking about whatever else is going on with Houston Cougars on Tuesday. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're live post-game, because we're going to be post-game each basketball game to make sure you're paying attention there. Locked On Coogs is happy to have you this afternoon, and a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team are Houston Cougars, who knock off UCF 69-68 every single day. Even the days we just feel like you barely survive. Go Coogs.